October 27, 1962. In a single 24-hour period, the world comes within minutes of nuclear war. Not once, 3 separate times. Deep in the Atlantic, a Soviet submarine is running out of oxygen. Its nuclear torpedo is armed. 3 officers must agree to fire. 2 say yes. Over Cuba, an American U-2 spy plane is struck by a Soviet surface-to-air missile. The pilot, Major Rudolf Anderson, does not survive. And over the Arctic, a second American U-2 has drifted off course and is flying through Soviet airspace. Soviet fighters are scrambling to intercept. Any one of those 3 moments could have triggered a nuclear exchange. Together, they define what historians now call Black Saturday, the most dangerous day in recorded history. This is the story of the Cuban Missile Crisis. But it is not the story you know, because the crisis did not end with American resolve alone. It ended with a secret deal, one that Kennedy kept hidden from the public, from NATO, and from most of his own advisors for 25 years. To understand why October 1962 became the closest the world has ever come to nuclear war, you have to go back 2 years, to a beach in Cuba and a catastrophic miscalculation. In April 1961, the CIA trains and equips a force of Cuban exiles to topple Fidel Castro. The plan? Land on the island, inspire a popular uprising, and achieve regime change in 72 hours. The Bay of Pigs operation fails completely. Within 3 days, the landing force is captured. Kennedy takes full public responsibility. In private, he is furious, at the CIA and at himself. In Moscow, Nikita Khrushchev watches the failure and draws a conclusion. Kennedy is weak. He can be pressured. Khrushchev is also facing his own strategic problem. The Americans have placed medium-range Jupiter missiles in Turkey, 15 of them pointed at Soviet cities, 10 minutes flight time from Moscow. His response is to mirror the move. If Washington can park missiles on the Soviet border, Moscow can park them 90 miles from Miami. Through the summer of 1962, Soviet freighters move military equipment to Cuba under cover of commercial shipping. The operation is codenamed Anadir. On the morning of October 14, 1962, an American U-2 reconnaissance aircraft makes a routine overflight of western Cuba. The photographs it returns show something that changes the calculus of the Cold War. Soviet medium-range ballistic missile sites, under active construction, 45 miles from Havana. The photographs reach CIA analysts on October 15th. They are on Kennedy's desk the morning of October 16th. Kennedy's first response, recorded on White House tape: "He can't do this to me." Within hours, Kennedy convenes a secret advisory group, 13 men in the cabinet room, tasked with finding a response before the missiles become operational. They call themselves the Executive Committee of the National Security Council, EXCOM. The debate inside that room is not what the public imagines. It is not orderly or confident. Generals want an immediate airstrike. Others want a full invasion. Robert Kennedy, the president's brother, argues against a surprise attack. "I now know how Tojo felt when he was planning Pearl Harbor." Kennedy chooses a middle path, a naval blockade, officially called a quarantine for legal reasons, around Cuba. No Soviet ship carrying military cargo will be allowed to pass. The missiles already on the island will be addressed through diplomacy. On October 22nd, Kennedy goes on national television. For the first time, he tells the American public what is sitting 90 miles off the coast of Florida. His speech is measured, but the message is not. Any nuclear missile launched from Cuba will be considered an attack by the Soviet Union on the United States, requiring a full retaliatory response. At that moment, 24 Soviet ships are crossing the Atlantic, carrying more military equipment toward Cuba. Several are heading directly for the quarantine line. In Washington, Secretary of State Dean Rusk watches the Soviet fleet on radar. He turns to his deputy and says, "We're eyeball to eyeball," and I think the other fellow just blinked. Most of the Soviet ships stop short of the line or turn back, a partial stand-down, but the missiles already on Cuban soil remain. Construction is continuing, and the crisis is far from over. By October 27th, day 13, the situation is deteriorating. Soviet technicians are accelerating work on the launch sites. CIA analysts estimate the missiles may be operational within days. In the Atlantic, a Soviet submarine designated B-59 has been out of radio contact for days. Running deep, being depth-charged by American destroyers trying to force it to surface, it does not know whether war has already begun. If you saw our episode on Vasily Arkhipov, you know what happens next. The submarine carries a nuclear torpedo. 2 of the 3 officers required to authorize a launch say yes. 1 says no. Because of that one man, the torpedo is not fired. On the surface, a different crisis is unfolding. At 10:17 in the morning, Cuban anti-aircraft guns and a Soviet surface-to-air missile bring down Major Rudolf Anderson's U-2 over eastern Cuba. Anderson is the only American killed in direct combat action during the Cuban Missile Crisis. His death creates an immediate problem in Washington. According to standing orders, a U-2 shootdown was to trigger retaliatory airstrikes against the responsible missile battery. Meanwhile, the second U-2 is still flying over Soviet airspace. Soviet and American fighter jets are both scrambling. For roughly an hour, an accidental dogfight over the Arctic is possible. Kennedy does not order the retaliatory strikes. The Arctic U-2 finds its way back to Alaska without incident, and Kennedy and his brother Robert make a decision that will define the resolution of the crisis and stay secret for a generation. By this point, Khrushchev has sent 2 letters to Washington, one cautious and exploratory, one publicly hardline. Robert Kennedy devises a response strategy. Answer the first letter. Ignore the second. Kennedy's public offer is straightforward. The United States will pledge not to invade Cuba if the Soviet missiles are removed and independently verified. But the private offer is something different. On the evening of October 27th, Robert Kennedy meets Soviet Ambassador Anatoly Dobrynin in private. He carries a message from the president. The Jupiter missiles in Turkey, the ones that gave Khrushchev his strategic justification for the whole operation, will be quietly removed within 4 to 5 months. But there is one condition. This side of the agreement can never be made public. If Khrushchev announces it, the deal is off. Kennedy cannot be seen trading American weapons positioned in a NATO ally for Soviet withdrawal. Not with a midterm election weeks away, not with European allies watching. Khrushchev accepts the terms of the secret deal. On October 28th, Soviet state radio broadcasts Khrushchev's announcement: the missiles will be dismantled and returned to the Soviet Union. The crisis is over. In Washington, Kennedy's advisors believe he simply stared Moscow down. Most of them do not know about Turkey. The Jupiter missiles in Turkey are removed the following April, quietly, officially attributed to routine modernization. NATO is not told the real reason. The full details of the Dobrynin back channel remain classified until 1989, 27 years after the crisis. When they are revealed at a Harvard conference attended by surviving ex-com members, several of those men say they had not known. The Cuban Missile Crisis is remembered as a triumph of American nerve, and in one sense, it was. Kennedy held the public line. No invasion, no capitulation on Cuba. But the resolution was also something else. A diplomatic trade carried out in complete secrecy that required both leaders to compromise more than either could admit publicly, and to trust that the other man would hold the secret. 2 concrete changes came out of it. The first, a direct communications line between Washington and Moscow, installed in 1963, so that the next crisis could be managed without 13 days of silence and assumption. It has been used in every major standoff since. The second, a partial nuclear test ban treaty signed in August 1963, limiting atmospheric nuclear testing. For the first time, both superpowers had agreed, in writing, that the arms race needed a ceiling. Neither change ended the Cold War, but both were evidence of something that had not existed before October 1962. The knowledge that these 2 men, in these 2 governments, could get to the edge and choose to step back. Subscribe to Turning Point Histories so you don't miss the next chapter. New videos every week. In the next video, we move from the closest nuclear escape of the Cold War to the Taiwan Strait in 1996. China fires ballistic missiles near Taiwan's busiest ports. The United States sends 2 aircraft carrier battle groups. Beijing backs down and spends the next 30 years making sure it never has to back down again. Stay tuned for Taiwan, 1996, the crisis China never forgot. The Cuban Missile Crisis lasted 13 days. 2 men, one in Washington, one in Moscow, found a way out. Most people who know the story have never been told what the way out actually was.